Hey Miraculous fans, Crystal here, and today I am finally going to be watching and reviewing the London special, because I still haven't seen it. So for context, I've seen everything before that, everything up to the season 5 finale. I have not watched the London special yet. I'm about to. I just wanted to record an intro first and just give a little context. And that context is that, as I've said in previous videos, if you've seen them, I have seen a bunch of spoilers. So it's not totally blind, but I am about to watch it for the first time just now. I have not fully watched the episode, but I do know a lot of things that happen in it. Um, like, I know that it takes place between season 5 and 6. No, scratch that. Not between. It basically takes place inside of the season 5 finale. Because I remember at the end of the finale, there was that sort of time skip, and then at the pool party, they said it had been a few months since Monarch was defeated, but I've been told the London special takes place like basically right after he makes the wish, I think. And yeah, I know like what it's basically about. I know it's got a bunch of stuff with Lila, who, by the way, I am still gonna call her Lila. I know a lot of fans call her Cerise or some other name, but I'm still using the name Lila because that's what we were introduced to her as. I know a lot of other people also still say Lila, even though that's probably not her real name, but whatever. I know she's in it a lot. Um, the other thing I wanted to touch on is that okay, when it comes to the specials as a concept, at first I thought, okay, the thing that makes it a special, at least going by what we had with the New York and Shanghai specials, was that I liked that it was very self contained. It wasn't very relevant to the main plot. But from what I've heard, this one's a lot different. This one is important. Like, you could skip New York or Shanghai and you wouldn't know the difference until you get to that part near the end of season 5 where the characters from those ones show up to help, and that means you need to know who they are. But other than that, like, I feel like a special should be pretty self-contained, which is why when the London special first came out and I heard about what happens in it, it's like, I always found that odd because the London special is like essential viewing, basically. You want to watch it between watching season 5 and 6, which is exactly what I'm gonna do now. So, yeah, enough about that. I'll save the rest of my thoughts for after I've actually watched it. So I will see you guys after a quick jump cut to after I watch the episode. Alright, I am back, guys, and holy crap, that was a lot. I literally just watched it, and that was a lot. And not just literally in the sense that it was longer than a normal episode. It was 50 minutes, 49 according to what I had. It was but yeah, it was long, but also it's like a lot, like some pretty heavy stuff. Like, you really shouldn't skip this. You really should watch this between seasons 5 and 6. Like, oh my god, that was a lot. I understand why some people could reason that it's skippable, because, like, stuff was gonna happen, but then she prevented it, so I guess nothing really, like, you wouldn't know the difference. But I think any fan should really watch this in between episodes 5 and 6. So let's get into this. I don't even know how I'm supposed to review this when there is so much to it. Like, I could go through every scene and talk about every little amazing moment, but then we'd be here forever. And like, I could go on, and I tend to ramble, so I'm not gonna try and get into the little details. But well, starting off with the actual beginning, the literal first thing I noticed was that there wasn't an intro, at least not at first. They wanted to start with a cold open, whereas regular episodes do have the theme song right away. They didn't do that. They had that scene, which was very ominous. One, because there was all these mysterious elements that I kept noticing, which they do get explained later. Things like, first I saw 3 boxes. They looked sort of like miraculous boxes at first. I wasn't sure what they were going to be for, but they were for the time travel devices, which that one is not fully explained. It is not explained later how she gets those time travel devices, because that is not part of the Akuma power. So like, is time travel a thing we invented? I mean, I know time travel is already a thing in this show, but only through the rabbit Miraculous, or the other form of time travel through the snake Miraculous, or things like Akuma powers like Time Tagger or Time Breaker or whatever. But yeah, how does she just have a time travel device watch thing? I don't think they really explained that, unless I'm missing something, but there's that. But yeah, there was a lot of things to unpack just in that scene alone that was so mysterious. Sure, a lot of it gets explained later. Like, the first thing I noticed was that screen that said 22 at the top and 1430 at the bottom, and the arrow like would switch which one it's pointing to. But I think that was just showing what point in time that Lila is at. I'm going to say, yes, that was Lila, and I'm just going to keep calling her Lila, even when I'm talking about her transformed. I don't remember what that blue transformation was called, if it even had a name. I think it actually, no, I'm remembering this right now. I think I've heard people say Time Stalker. I'm not sure if it was said in the episode or not. Plus there was the other transformation when she was taking the Miraculous from her bedroom. But yeah, that opening scene was so ominous. I mean, you start off with Nooroo just begging, don't read the book. You still have time, because you'll forget what you saw, and then if you don't read the book, nothing bad will happen. So Nooroo is trying. Every time Nooroo was on screen, my first thought was just, poor Nooroo. I remember thinking, when season 5 ended, I remember thinking to myself, if we're getting a new long running villain, what if we could get the Butterfly Miraculous back and spare Nooroo from being owned by a villain, and have a villain who gets a different Miraculous? Because then we could see a whole different formula to the show where the main villain is using a different power. Obviously that idea is not what happens, but that was my idea of like, spare Nooroo that torment, give a different Kwame a turn, whatever. But yeah, poor Nooroo. And yeah, it is Lila with that blonde look. I can't remember if we saw that particular look of hers before. But we can tell it's her. Like, we know she loves her disguises. And then when she does read the book, I love Nooroo just says, "This is the end." And that's when we get the intro, which the whole time I was thinking that intro sequence, I don't know, I don't know what to say about it other than I was just thinking this is really cool. It's just really cool, and that's all I can say to describe it. Like I can't like pick out specific reasons that it appealed to me or something, but it was just really cool. I don't know why. Um yeah, and then the first scene doesn't have our protagonist in it, and then the next scene after the intro is also from a perspective of Bunnyx, multiple Bunnyxes actually. We get a nice little funny scene of three different Bunnyxes playing chess, and I wanted to point out for the record that because of this scene, we do know their ages at those three different points. We already knew that our younger Alix was 15 because she turned 15 in Timebreaker, but now we also know that the one we call adult Bunnyx is 25 and the older one was 70. But I loved how it started off with the Bunnyxes, and the way we're introduced to this threat is that the two older ones were fading. But I also love how calm they both were. They were pretty calm about it because they knew it would get fixed, I guess, because they remembered everything. In fact, it reminded me a lot of Doctor Who, The Day of the Doctor, when the 11th Doctor is like, "Oh, this is happening now. Oh, not now, I'm busy." And he says, I remember this, sort of. Once they started fading, the older ones were just like, "Oh, it's time for this now." They're like, one of them said, "It just started." They remember from when they were the youngest one. But then, interestingly, um, Alix actually gave the audience a bit of a recap of like the whole show, sort of, which we didn't really need that, but the recap kind of shows that maybe they were intending this episode to be accessible to people just getting into the show. I've seen people say that about season 6 as well, about it being a soft reboot, which I kind of disagree because, like, to jump into season 6 and to not know about all the stuff that's already happened, I feel like, I don't know, I feel like it would be tricky and confusing, but that's just me. That's just because I know everything. And with and but this episode having that recap makes me feel like maybe they wanted to allow for that if people wanted to start with this one. It kind of reminds me of the Steven Universe movie, how they also wanted it to be accessible to people who didn't watch the show. So the beginning of that had a bit of a recap. But during the recap segment, my first question that popped into my head was actually when she was talking about all the different um, changes and plot points. It made me wonder, does Alix know that Adrien is a sentimonster? Okay, hear me out. Alix seems to know pretty much all of the secrets in the show. Like, she knows who Ladybug is and who Cat Noir is and a lot of other stuff because she sees things when she's going to the future and stuff. But there was no mention of whether or not she knows that particular secret. It is possible she knew all along who Monarch was. I always wondered about that, or at least the adult one would have known. Way back in Time Tagger, when we first met adult Bunnyx, I think there was a moment when they asked, "Then do you know who Hawkmoth is? Can you tell us?" And I think she would have said she couldn't. So I feel like, I don't know if the youngest one knew I don't know at what point she knew, but I wonder to what degree of secrets she knows, including the plot point of Adrien being a center monster. But moving on, because all of this stuff I've talked about is still within the first 10 minutes, there is a lot that happens in this episode. Because then we finally get back to Ladybug, right after, right after Gabriel made the wish, and we had to have her go to London. She talked to Kagami first, which I found it really interesting, that scene, because Kagami also knows pretty much everything. Everything, really. She knows, and she's keeping the secrets really well. And she went along with the lies, actually. She did try to give advice. What she said was, she said, "You're blinded by love, Marinette." But then she said, "Well, this is your wish, I'll honor it." So Kagami's sort of on the fence where, like, she thinks Marinette's blinded by love, and that's why she's lying to Adrien and everybody else about Gabriel being monarch. But that being said, she trusts Marinette's judgment, and she's like, if that's your wish, I'm not going to get in the way of that. So she's going along with it. And they also talked about Kagami's mother, who, was an accomplice. And in the end, Kagami decided to, I think she's basically going to play dumb and act like she believes the story that Ladybug tells the public, where she says that Gabriel and Mrs. Tsurugi were forced by Monarch to make the alliance rings and go along with that plan because Monarch was supposedly threatening them with Adrien and Kagami. And yeah, that's pretty believable with what the public knows, so that works. Then we got a pretty emotional scene where she tells Adrien, which was a lot. Like, he's like, "Why aren't you talking?" It takes her a while to say it, which I really liked how that was performed. And the way she started to say, "Your father was," and like for a second, it sounds like she's thinking of saying "your father was Monarch," but she doesn't. And you can hear the conflict in her voice when she says "a hero" instead. Like, it's going against everything she knows and believes in, but also she knows she needs to tell this lie. And when she tells him that his father's gone, I noticed the animation, it takes away the background and the world actually crumbles around him. I think that was a great, like, metaphor or whatever it is, with the animation. And another thing, which I guess she doesn't notice, is Adrien says, "If he hadn't locked me in here, I could have saved him." And you can see a close-up Adrien reaching for where his ring would have been. Which means Adrien's going to be dealing with a lot of feelings of guilt as well. Survivor's guilt as well, but also just guilt that he couldn't save his father because he was locked up and he didn't have his Miraculous. He couldn't be a hero alongside Ladybug. If she hadn't had to do that on her own, he could have helped. But that scene is really emotional in different ways, because then, like, if I had been in that room with them, I wanted to point out that yes, Adrien, you're going through a lot, and but Ladybug here is also going through a lot. Like, does he not realize she just went through something crazy? Obviously, she must have. She clearly just went through something crazy. But that being said, he is also pretty justified when he stands up and kind of yells at her, saying, you know, why didn't you save him and all that. And he also asks why didn't the magic ladybugs bring him back in restoring everything. And she didn't fully explain it, but the answer to that was because the magic ladybugs can't bring back somebody who was sacrificed by the wish. Obviously, the wish is more powerful. But it's also, it would have hit her so hard when he pulled away from her touch, but he accepted Kagami's comfort. But not just that, then when he gets back to Paris, he does hug Marinette. So that must be pretty conflicting for her, knowing that he rejected her as Ladybug but can hug her as Marinette. And it must be really weird for her to have him react so differently to her in two different ways. And again, this is only the beginning. This is all just the aftermath of the season 5 finale, because we still have the rest of the episode for the whole time travel plot. And one of my favorite lines is when she's going to bed, Tikki tells her, just get some rest, you look like you need it. And then she says, again, she adds, and you will need it. Now, I've heard people talk about this, where people have said, does this mean Tikki knew everything about who Monarch was all along? Because she goes back in time and takes the Miraculous from the point of origins. So does that mean Tikki knew everything because she saw this point in the future? Well, that depends, because it depends on two things. One, you could say, well, maybe Tikki doesn't know all along because she was transformed pretty much the whole time, and it's not clear whether Kwamis are aware of what's going on around the person once they're absorbed into the Miraculous. But if she's not aware, then she herself, Tikki, did not physically see or hear anything telling her Gabriel is Monarch. I don't think she did. And the other point is, we do have evidence that she does know because of things like that line I just mentioned. She said, you will need your rest, because soon she'll have to do all that stuff that Tikki knew. Oh, it's happening tonight. I guess she knew. She's been waiting. But speaking of her going to bed, I do want to point out one thing that I kept laughing at. In the scene where Lila is taking the Miraculous from her bedroom, and then Ladybug goes back in time and tries to stop her, I kept thinking, everybody in that room, Marinette and all those Kwamis, must have been really heavy sleepers, because how do they not hear anything going on? Like, okay, Lila might have something to her transformation to make her really stealthy and silent because she was planning this, but like, what about when Ladybug's chasing her around? Like, how does nobody wake up? And I was saying the same thing later on when they're in like Monarch's lair and stuff, and she jumps in to try and stop Lila from seeing her identity. And again, how does nobody hear anything at that point in the past for it to not mess up the timeline? I'm sorry, I just kept finding that really funny. Or like the one where they're in that building in London They are like, she is talking to Kagami in the next room while they're fighting over the notebook. I'm like, how does nobody hear that? But whatever, it's fine. That's not like a major plot hole. I just found it funny. The other thing that I am going to nitpick is the fact that they made a point to in the episode to have Marinette notice the Butterfly Miraculous, and she was like, I could just reach in and grab it now, and then that would solve everything. And it would have, but then Alix is like, no, no, that would mess up the timeline. She's like, no, don't make more changes to the timeline because that would make more problems. And I sort of get what she's saying. Like, if you take the Butterfly Miraculous there, then Lila wouldn't be able to akumatize herself and get the Miraculous and make the wish, so she wouldn't be in the burrow to take the Butterfly Miraculous. But then it's like, how do you decide which changes are okay? Because it's not okay to take the Butterfly Miraculous, but it is okay for Alix to, to grab Marinette and try and stop the wish. Like, what if Lila's wish was meant to happen? Who decides which parts of the timeline are okay to change and which parts are meant to happen? So that is really stupid, the way they explained away the fact that they can't just take the Butterfly Miraculous. Like, there are so many episodes where everything would be solved if we just called Bunnyx and we were like, hey, just time travel over there and stop that thing. That'd be great. And it would solve everything. But then I guess we wouldn't really have much of a show if everything was solved through time travel. Which is why a lot of people are just annoyed in general when the show first introduced time travel, because then it's like, well, then you could solve everything. But then they try to explain away, you can't change that, but you can change these things. So, yeah. But the other important parts of this episode I found were the scenes between Marinette and Nathalie, because now they have a very interesting dynamic, because Nathalie knows everything, including knowing that who Ladybug is, of course, and she supports that. She's on their side now. Which raised a question I noticed when they let the Kwamis out. They did so with Nathalie putting her hand on the machine. Which makes me wonder, so that means that Gabriel allowed for that machine to be triggered by Nathalie. Which means he still trusted her, right up until the end. But there were quite a few moments near the end of season 5 when Nathalie was going against him a bit. Like, sure, she wasn't completely against him. She didn't go around telling people he was monarch. But she did go against him in some ways, and yet he still trusted her with the ability to let the Kwamis out, and she never did. So I like this though. I like that we have this character in Nathalie who is a bit morally grey. But in a way, a lot of these characters have some morally grey areas. Like the fact that Kagami and Marinette have agreed not to out Mrs. Tsurugi, and she could be sent for prison for her involvement, but they decided to let it go. But I remember one major quote that I've seen people point out during a scene with Nathalie is when she asked Marinette, like, what would you have done instead? Marinette said, I should have made the wish myself to make things better for Adrien. Like maybe she wanted him to have his whole family and have his mother back and just have the happiest life he could. And Nathalie asked, what would you have sacrificed? And Marinette says, myself. Which, it's a small moment, but it's pretty heavy. Like, is Marinette suicidal? Now, okay, don't get me wrong. It doesn't completely mean somebody is suicidal if they're just willing to sacrifice themselves for someone. Like, we see it in other shows or movies where, yeah, a character might not be full on like suicidal self-harm, but they are willing to jump in and sacrifice themselves for someone they love. Still, the fact that she was so ready to give that answer that she would happily sacrifice herself, maybe not happily, but she was willing to, that's pretty heavy. A lot of moments in this episode show how much stress she is under now with everything that's happened. The show has gotten so heavy, and it really sets a tone for setting up season 6 as well, where there is a lot more at stake with all these secrets and lies, and it's just a lot on her. Moving on, the conclusion worked out pretty well. She erased what was in the book, and so Lila just kind of gave up on that plan. And I did enjoy things like they gave us some action scenes, like when they were fighting over the book and things. But one of my favorite moments was I remember saying, "Oh, that is so clever," when she took the book and erased it and wrote something else in it, and then they used the burrow in just the right way that it looked like she hadn't even gone into it. So Lila didn't even realize that she changed what was in the book until she deakumatized herself and read it, and it said Gabriel was Ladybug, and she knows that's just wrong. But she's like, well, I know Gabriel's not Ladybug, so then why would I have written that? I don't know. This plan just got messed up. Screw it. But moving on to the actual conclusion of the episode, we did get a nice moment where she asked the Bunnyxes if she made the right decision lying to Adrien. I really liked this quote the Bunnyxes said. I feel like it also helps to set up season 6. Is first they said, lying to him or telling the truth. Each of those choices would lead to different consequences. So perhaps Bunnyx has looked into alternate timelines, sort of like a Cat Blanc situation where, there was that possible timeline, but we prevented it. Bunnyx knows, either lying or telling the truth will lead to very different consequences. And then she said, the important thing about these choices is how you own up to them. I think that works really well to set up season 6, because when we're watching season 6, we're gonna have in the back of our minds this secret. The fandom is so divided on this secret, as a lot of people are debating, saying she should just tell Adrien. And I was the same way at first. When I first watched the season 5 finale, I was really not okay with this big lie. And my prediction for season 6 was like, the longer you wait to tell him, the more it's going to destroy him when he eventually finds out. Because he will find out. Like, if I could talk to Marinette, I would say to her, like, you can't keep this secret forever. He's going to find out eventually. and it's better if he hears it from you, because if he finds out from someone else, and then he's like, well, you were never planning to tell me the truth, that would hurt him even more. Not just finding out his father was monarch, but also finding out that his girlfriend, hid that truth from him for so long. But aside from the heavy stuff, this episode also did have quite some nice moments. Like, they tried to sprinkle in some humor despite all the serious stuff. Mostly, like, the chess scene with the Bunnyxes had some humor. Or just at the end, there's even though things are all going to work out, there's this nice moment of relief and happiness. Like, when all the circles windows in the burrow come back and they realize everything's fixed, and they just fall over laughing, and I just felt that sense of happiness and relief that Marinette and Alix shared in that moment. Oh yeah, but the other moment of humor I remember is when everything was restored. She woke up, she realized everything was fixed, and she started, laughing and saying, "It's okay, everything's okay now." And Tikki and Plag was so confused, and he says something like, "I feel like something major just happened, but I have no idea." Because for him, it was an instant. And then I think Tikki just said to him, "Oh, I know." Because yet another hint that she knew this was coming. She knows what must have just happened because she remembers it from a while ago. I mean, there was another moment of humor that a lot of people mentioned when people first watched the episode is when she goes back and takes the Miraculous from her past self. There's a nice throwaway line where she's like, "Oh, that felt like it was like 10 years ago." It felt like it, but in the show's world, it hasn't even been like a full year, I think. Yeah, it's been, yeah, it was, yeah, they did a full school year. That's right. Yeah, Origins was the start of a school year, and the end of season 5 was, they had the end of school year party. So, yeah, a full year for them, but we are nearing basically the 10-year anniversary. So they knew the fans have been joking about how slow the show has been going, where it doesn't match real life like other shows do. One season is 1 year in their world, and this show doesn't do that. And they knew the fans would like that joke because we've been making those jokes. Fans are always making those jokes like, "Oh, by the time we get an identity reveal, I'll be like 10 years older," or like, "Oh, I'll be a senior citizen when Marinette and Adrien are high school seniors," or something. All those jokes about the pacing. It's all just good fun. And I did love when season 5 ended, how they finally have a semblance of a timeline where they ended the school year and they said, next year things will be a bit different, new school and all that. I did notice the very end of the episode is zoomed in on Marinette in her new outfit for season 6. I love that they used that end of this episode to tease season 6 with the new look. That was our first look at her new outfit. I'm not going to get too into my opinions on the redesigns for season 6 because I'll save that for another video about just the season 6 designs. But yeah, I think this episode concluded really well. My only other complaint, I guess, is that Adrien did not play much part in it, which is also my complaint I had about the season 5 finale as well, is that a lot of people complained that Adrien was not involved when we finally took down our big bad villain of Monarch, and he was not there for it. And just like in this episode, Adrien wasn't really a central character. I complain about this a lot, where the show is called Ladybug and Cat Noir, but there's a lot of times where, it's not Ladybug and Cat Noir. It's just Ladybug, and, Adrien feels like a side character. Like, he got that scene where she tells him a bit about what happened. He got that scene, and then at the very end, when he shows up as Cat Noir, and it really sucks as well that he was so okay with not being told anything. And I get that, well, from a writing perspective, she can't tell him because she'd be telling Adrien, but she doesn't know that, which means she does not trust Cat Noir that much. If she because from her perspective, why couldn't she at least tell Cat Noir who Monarch was and trust him with that secret? She doesn't know that would be telling Adrien. My only idea of why she doesn't trust Cat Noir with that is because back in Cat Blanc, it was Adrien who found out her identity, which somehow led to Cat Noir knowing her identity from her perspective. Maybe she thinks there's some sort of connection, not that she suspects him of being Cat Noir, but just that, last time, when Adrien found out who Ladybug was, it led to Cat Noir knowing. Like, there's this bit where in Cat Blanc where she's like, well, I know Adrien wouldn't tell Cat Noir, but maybe he told one friend who tells someone else and tells someone else, and yeah. So she doesn't suspect him of being Cat Noir, but maybe she's just being extra safe. She doesn't know who Cat Noir is, so she does not feel safe telling him these secrets. If it were up to her, she probably wouldn't tell anyone at all, but Nathalie and Kagami already know these things. That does remind me of one thing I just thought of, is that Nathalie knows everything and Kagami knows everything, and then we have characters like Alia knows she's Ladybug, but Alia doesn't know who Monarch was, or like Luca knows who both Ladybug and Cat Noir are, but he doesn't know who Monarch was. But the other character who knows she's Ladybug and also knows who Monarch was is Felix, and he did not make any appearance in this episode. So that is also interesting, is that I wonder what's going on with Felix. He would have heard on the news that Ladybug told a story that Monarch was that Monarch forced Gabriel and Mrs. Tsurugi to do that stuff for him and all that stuff, and that Gabriel sacrificed himself to defeat Monarch. Felix would have heard the news and he would have been like, I know that's not right. Felix knew who Monarch was. Kagami and Felix knew. They're also the few characters who know who the center monsters are. Like, okay, Marinette knows, and Nathalie knows, and Kagami and Felix know that certain characters are center monsters. So Felix also knows a lot, and he made no appearance here. It would have been interesting if he had helped in some way, but we didn't see him at all in this. And from what I've heard about the season 6 episodes that are out that I haven't watched yet, I haven't heard any mention of Felix either. Like, I wonder what's going on with him. But that aside, getting to the point, this episode was really heavy. It had a lot to it, but at the same time, with the way everything gets solved at the end, it could be like skippable. Like, you could skip it and go straight from season 5 finale to watching season 6, and you wouldn't really know the difference. But, my recommendation is, any fan should watch this in between season 5 and 6. It had so much to it, and I loved it. I loved it. You can tell I loved it because I'm talking about it so much. But speaking of which, I have rambled so long. This video is getting pretty long. So I'm just going to conclude by saying, this was a lot. It was a lot, and, it had its ups and downs. There were a few small nitpicks that I complained about, but all in all, this episode definitely lived up to the hype, and I understand why it was so big and talked about when it first came out. And don't ask why I didn't watch it immediately, but I didn't, and now I have, and I understand why it was like so talked about, because a lot happened in it. There was so much to it. But as I said, there were a lot of moments that teased season 6, which is why I am so excited to finally start watching season 6, which I am going to do very soon. So my next review, or maybe my next one, might be another retro review, but the one after, I'll probably alternate. I am definitely looking forward to starting season 6. So, with that being said, I'll see you next time for season 6 and other things as well. See you next time, guys.